Noveck. So anyway, hello, everyone. Nice to be with you. I'm Beth Goldberg. I have the pleasure of leading a research team at Google inside of an incubator called Jigsaw. We are a nonprofit unit that works to make free and open tools for folks like you all in policymaking and civil society. And I'm really excited to tell you the story today of how we got to team up with Ben Peterson and team in Bowling Green. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. And I'll give you a little bit of context of what we got to do together in Bowling Green. And then we will go ahead and answer a bunch of your questions. Let me come over to slideshow. All right. Can you all see my slides okay?
We will soon. It says, there it goes. We see it now.
Wonderful. Okay. So this is really a story of a dialogue that was powered by AI in the background, but really this is more a story about a town that, a county that came together to want to have a conversation collectively about their future and actually hear from everyone. So as many of you know, social media has given us lots of tools to talk at scale. We have more and more ways to actually have people express themselves, but we haven't actually built tools to listen at scale. And so one of the key challenges here was if we did invite everyone in to have one of these sort of virtual town halls, what would we actually do to make sense of all of these comments? And I won't launch right into the answer of how we built the AI to do it, but that was sort of our premise was like, is there a way that we could actually invite people in and then distill all of what they're saying without losing the nuance. And in a way that actually gave folks like Ben in local government a sense of what their constituents actually wanted in a way that was actionable and parsable and where you didn't lose some of those areas of disagreement too. We didn't want to water things down just into areas of agreement. So we came to this work through something called Perspective API, which I won't take a long time talking about here, but this is a moderation tool that is used billions of times a day by like the New York Times and Reddit and Wikipedia, places you often go. And it works in the background by allowing the moderators there to filter comments and gives each of these comments a score and says if something is more or less toxic. We use that in the background here, but we said, how do we actually build a tool like this that would be much more self-service, not just for moderators, but for local governments? And so we came upon the team in Bowling Green, Kentucky, actually through one of those platforms that was trying to have more open conversations, a platform you may have heard of called Polis. Polis has been doing these large-scale democratic conversations since at least 2014. And they're one of the oldest in this game. They have a very simple interface that I'll show you in a second. But Bowling Green was exciting for us at Google for a few reasons. It's this sort of microcosm of urbanizing America, and I'll let Ben tell you a lot more about it because he's actually there. But we were really excited for a chance to help this community really collectively define their future and do so in a way that might be replicable and relevant to lots of other parts of the US. One of the people that we worked with very closely there, who maybe doesn't know that he's on this slide of ours, is their judge executive or sort of like a mayor, Doug Gorman. And we loved one of these lines that Doug had when we were first trying to wrap our arms around this problem space, which was, do we want this growth to happen to us, or do we want it to happen for us? And that was really, that helped us understand that this should be a tool to help the community collectively take action so that it doesn't just feel like they're reacting to changes in their community. And so the tools that they had at their disposal pre-AI were things that you all are familiar with. There were town hall and sort of city planning meetings that looked like this. They often happened in the middle of the day when people maybe, were at work or not able to join or didn't feel welcome to join. There were things like traditional polls that had sort of discrete answers, or there were, every couple of years, elections, referenda, these sort of really resource intensive formal mechanisms. But we wanted something that was lightweight, iterative, a lot more textured than like a multiple choice answer, and also really accessible to a wider array of people. And so when we were thinking about it, we thought, okay, the number of people who would traditionally attend a town hall, I think Doug told us, and Ben, you can correct me, I think the number was 8 at one of the recent town halls. And as you can tell from the emojis here, those 8 people had a lot of strong opinions. They came with agendas. We don't want to exclude those people, but we wanted to say, hey, could we actually collect data from about 1,000 times or more that many people? And that is exactly what AI is good at. It's good at being able to take large sets of data and make sense out of them. Where we started, and I'm happy to elaborate on this in the Q&A, was actually by sitting down in the living rooms of families all across Bowling Green and asking, what would make you join a civic conversation? So this is actually a photo from a Burmese migrant family in Bowling Green. We met with folks who were at all levels of disparity, folks who had recently left rehab facilities and halfway houses, also really well-established families that had lived on the golf course, and everything in between. And some of them didn't even understand the premise of this question of what a civic conversation was. And some of them, were actively participating in these already and felt empowered. But ultimately, we took away some lessons that people needed to be invited in. They needed to be invited in by people they trusted. And they needed to know that their time was going to be worthwhile, that folks like Ben were going to be listening to them and taking what they said seriously. And so we can get into some of the ways that we called them in, that we made this process frictionless for them, and that we ensured that local leaders were actually listening on the other side of it. But those, I think, were the 3 key ingredients. Part of how we did that was really localized marketing and branding. So I don't speak these languages, but folks in Bowling Green do. And so we made sure that our advertisements reached people where they were. And you can see the QR code there in the bottom right was sort of how we directed people to this simple website interface. I'll show you a quick schematic here. Oh, this is actually a video. I'll get to the schematic in a second, but this was actually some of the marketing that we used on social media to invite people into the conversation. And what I want you to notice, look for where Google appears, look for where local government appears in this invitation to participate.
This February, you can let your voice be heard.
What do you think BG could be?
More child-friendly activities, more museums,
bringing in more tech-focused businesses and programs.
It's to continue to build on infrastructure.
Multi-sports facilities. I'm talking 10 field turfs like the Paradise Sports Complex. And
I think could be the biggest city in Kentucky one day.
And still have that small town, hometown vibe and feel.
The town's blowing up, we're trying to do it responsibly.
Come on, join in and let us know what you think.
What do you think BG could be?
When it's all grown up.
I love that video. It has so many amazing voices from citizens across Bowling Green. And as you might have caught from my leading question there are no elected officials in that video. There is no sign of Google or the tech folks. This is really centering the voices of community leaders and trusted folks who you probably, if you were living in Bowling Green, you probably know at least one of the people featured in that video. And that's, I think, what made it so powerful and effective. All right, let's see if I can get to the next slide here, not make you guys watch this again. So what did it actually look like? And then I'll wrap up here in just a second. It was a really simple website interface. It was designed mobile first. It had this sort of opportunity to post a comment, sort of tweet length comment, and then be able to vote, agree and disagree with other people's comments. This is the Polis interface that I mentioned. We just sort of put this nice wrapper around it for Bowling Green, and everyone was answering a single question. We concentrated the conversation around this question of, what do you hope to see in Bowling Green, Kentucky in the future? What do you hope we preserve? And so we can talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of having that sort of future-oriented single question to generate a lot of ideas. This is a little quick GIF of what the actual report looked like, and I won't walk you through the whole thing. I'm happy to go more in depth, but ultimately, once people participated and we were able to gather thousands of comments and millions of votes on other people's ideas, the AI then categorized these ideas into different topics. You can see here roads and traffic was a topic, and then it took each of these individual comments and it showed you how many people upvoted and downvoted them. And then the AI was able to sort of organize those where you can see where there's a lot of areas of agreement. It provides sort of topic level summaries and allows either the public or a policymaker to understand at a glance what does our community think about this given topic and where is there maybe low-hanging fruit where there's common ground. Okay, so drum roll. Ultimately, we had over 8,000 participants, more than 4,000 proposals, and over 1 million different opinions shared. This was over the course of about a month. And I'll end with 2 stats that bring me a lot of joy. The first is that when we surveyed the public, 83% of people said that after participating, I gained a better understanding of different viewpoints, even if I disagree with them. And we know that this is the foundations for depolarization and building sort of social cohesion. And lastly, local leaders, folks like Ben, took a survey that we gave before and after, and they said things like, this report makes it easier for me to more accurately represent the community. So I'll just end by saying this feels to me like a really solid sign that this could be a building block for more responsive democracy and a tool to help build cohesion amongst our communities. Thank you all so much. Excited to make this conversation now.
Fantastic. Let's dive in. Thank you for sharing that. Let's bring Ben back into our screen. What we're going to do is to have a little bit of a sort of moderated conversation, which will give folks who are here time to put your questions in the chat. Again, please feel free to also continue the conversation. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Conversation in the chat, questions in the Q&A. You will see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And then the chat again for conversation. So Ben, let's come over to you real quick here. Beth told us about sort of the core issue, which was this question of growth that you were struggling with or wanting to get people's feedback on. But I'm really curious, what was it about this issue? Why here? Why now? What was the problem that really drove you to say yes to this opportunity? And given all the dangers, risks, and heavy lifting of public engagement before, I'm just wondering again, what were the conditions that allowed you to try this? And will you keep trying this?
So the easiest answer is we had nothing to lose. You know, I think Beth alluded to the issue of just getting public participation in general, especially when you have the old school mentality of just setting a meeting at a particular place like City Hall and expecting people to show up. And, you know, even online or print surveys, it just doesn't work anymore. Especially when we were one of the fastest growing community in Kentucky. Many of our new residents are from other parts of the state, other parts of the country, and honestly, many different parts of the world too. So, of course, we affectionately call them "you ain't from around here's." But but as we've grown, we realize that we need to do different, do something better, and sometimes you can't come up with those ideas on your own. So typically what we would get would be people that are upset about a specific specific issue that only wanted to talk about that one thing versus maybe bigger community issues. We would have advocates or stakeholders that would show up that are very helpful, but only represent one part of the community. So we really just did not have anything to lose, especially in local government. Currently, there is been a difficulty, especially since COVID, really, about giving and getting public information and getting opinions. Different social medias, different ways to disseminate that information is hard, and getting that information hard. So the challenge is just really about getting meaningful public engagement, if you can get it at all. Just that lack of participation, either people are too busy or the apathy towards government or government processes. And then I also believe that the tone of conversations with government has also changed in the past decade or so. It's more about the loudest and sometimes the most belligerent people win. So to that point, that normal process has become less productive and maybe less helpful. So I think that's just that attitude change and a loss of civilities really made it somewhat difficult. So just to summarize it, I guess a measure of confidence is lost in those traditional public input processes.
And I would ask both of you, going into this process, this AI-driven process, AI-enabled process, what was the one assumption you had going in? What was the biggest surprise going into this? And maybe, Beth, let me ask you this first, especially being very much boots on the ground, moving out of the lab into the field with this experiment. What surprised you the most?
Yeah, one thing that surprised me is I assumed that there was going to be low turnout and sort of a lack of civic engagement driven by mistrust in government. That if this was sort of sanctioned by the government, that was going to be the real blocker, and we were going to have to do a lot to make sure it looked like a civil society-led effort. But when we sat down on people's couches and actually asked them about civic engagement, it wasn't that they mistrusted Ben and his colleagues at all. Actually, the biggest barrier here was low self-efficacy. People thought, I don't know enough about government. I don't have opinions. And if I did, why would my opinions even matter? People thought, oh, I'm not welcome at that type of gathering. They really didn't understand that their lived experience was actually expertise. We did these things called breaching exercises where we physically brought folks from Bowling Green into some of these city meetings. And when we, scheduled the time with them, they said, oh, I can't go to that. I don't own a suit. Or I'm not a lawyer. Am I allowed to go to the city planning meeting? Like I don't have that degree. And we had to say, oh, yeah, it's actually open to everyone from the public. And they've really felt uncomfortable often in these spaces. And so I think for me, one of the biggest light bulb moments was just making sure that we made this as accessible as possible. So that came back to a lot of these invisible barriers to civic engagement, like having someone who looks like you in the marketing material, making engagement in the product actually anonymous. Making it so you didn't have to sign up and give away, your PII as you joined. So I think all of these things were sort of surprising to me, just how much the barrier was people's own lack of self-efficacy.
And Ben, for you, biggest surprise?
Probably in the results themselves. You and just the type of communications and the variety of communications, the participation levels itself was easily the biggest surprise. I don't think we were surprised by any of the specific statements themselves, but we were surprised by the measurable agreement of those statements and how there appeared to be more agreement on things that we weren't sure about, topics we weren't sure that there would be agreement about, and it was very refreshing to see. So that was the biggest surprise to us, because as a government official, oftentimes we only hear the negative. We hear the complaints. We don't always hear the positives or hear that anything reaffirming how you're doing anything right. So that in itself boosts confidence in the conversations we're having and allows that public input to then give us a hint or ideas of what we need to be talking about that we're not talking about, but also the things that we can build upon too. So it's really just about confidence boosting, hopefully on the public side, but also on that government official side.
So maybe let me pick up on a point that both of you have made, which is this kind of pleasant surprise about the number of people who participated, the productivity, and how quickly they participated. I think for the folks who are here, at least who've been in the field for a while, the fact that the participation was so civil and civic will not come as a surprise. The scale, though, may. Barcelona, for example, just ran an engagement very recently. They have a population of 1.7 million people, and 100 people participated. The city of Nashville, it was just on the news last week. Was it Nashville? I want to say it was Nashville. I may be slandering the wrong city. Yes, it was. They discontinued their participatory budgeting process that they had been at the forefront of doing because they felt not enough people were participating. Was it the technology? Was it the outreach? Was it the nifty flyers in green, which are very pretty? What was it, the nature of the question you asked, or what led, in your view, why did people participate? And then I'm going to come back to, depending on your answer, we want to talk about what other people can do to replicate that. But let me just ask you, and this is to either of you, like, what in your view was the reason it worked?
I've got a few, and then Ben, I'm curious to your perspective on the ground. So
Sure.
we thought about this a lot, and we really approached the research phase as a prep for recruitment, prep for the marketing, and as well as the product design. And so when we went and were talking to people, we understood that we had to meet them where they were. So all of our outreach was grassroots. We had those QR codes up in mosques and churches. We had them sent around in WhatsApp chats. We had them up at the basketball games. They were in the coffee shops on the coffee cups. So there was a very like physical in-person element to the outreach. There was also a lack of, so there's also those invitations came from trusted local leaders, right? It wasn't just a random flyer stuck up at the mosque. The imam or the minister of the church actually mentioned the campaign was going on, or the basketball coach, right? And then once you got that QR code, the access itself was frictionless. There was no login. It was designed to be mobile first. The UI interface was super simple. There was no new fancy website or app you had to download. The whole thing was anonymous. We heard from a lot of folks, especially recent refugees and migrants, that in order for it to feel safe and be honest, they needed to be able to be anonymous. The whole thing was really time efficient. This was like, there wasn't a bunch of prep work you had to do. The whole thing you could do. Someone said that they did it standing in line in the grocery store. And then I think, and this is where I'm curious for Ben's perspective, I think because it was sanctioned by the government said, we're going to listen to this. This is part of a government process. We care about what you say. But it wasn't government led and branded. There was this nice sweet spot we kind of found where it was like, your comments matter, but this isn't like a government effort. Right, this is by the people for the people was sort of how it was framed. I think that there was a nice sort of Goldilocks solution there that invited people to come in, but also to feel like their time was going to be well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I was going to say absolutely. I mean, it was all of those things you mentioned. It was a comprehensive effort and not something government, or at least our local government, could have pulled off alone and didn't want to. We very much talked a lot about biases and how most government officials just stayed out of the process, and certainly those initial conversations on purpose to not have those biases. We really wanted it to be that grassroots community-led effort, but supported by the government and guided by the government to where to give it some credence as well. So it really was a comprehensive effort by the community and not by the government, not by any one individual or group of individuals. It really was community and really was a be the community effort. If you want to be the community, be the community. So, Innovation Engine was our partners. They had a great, creative, well-planned outreach campaign along with Jigsaw to come in. It just generated all this excitement amongst local officials, amongst the public. It really just went well. Technology made it easy to participate. The face-to-face meetings made it meaningful and exciting. And it was really good timing. Our community was just ready for this type of engagement. We wanted to listen, and the people wanted to express their thoughts. And this just gave us that catalyst or that vehicle to do so.
So before I get to all the AI questions, which is why most people are here, they told us at the beginning they want to know about the AI tools and the tech stack, et cetera. I have to ask the elephant in the room question that is also, I think, on people's minds, which is, come on, you had Google helping you. Well, not Google, Jigsaw, sorry. You had, and I see Innovation Engine is here too. You had all these folks helping you. And I don't know if Sam should feel free to weigh in at any point here or respond in the chat as well. I think people are probably wondering, like, do they need, first of all, maybe they're wondering, how do I get Jigsaw to come in and help me, number one. Number two, can I do this without Jigsaw? how much of it, like how much heavy lifting, like it's one thing to say AI decreased the cost of doing a lot of this, but it sounds like a lot was spent on marketing. A lot of time was spent on outreach, on making those flyers, on someone had to put it up on the board in the mosque or in the laundromat or et cetera. So let's just speak to that question of what was the collaboration? How did that work? And whether you want to talk about how others can collaborate with you or can they do it without this collaboration?
I'll start this one, Beth, and then you can jump in. So really the process itself, to me, wasn't a whole lot different than other processes you already do as a community, especially maybe as a planner, coming from a planning perspective. So you spend time planning the process. You plan to plan, right? So you spend time planning that process and begin with the end in mind. So you've got people in your community that are used to doing that. What is it you want to accomplish or gain a better understanding of? What are you going to do with the results? That's a big one. And we're still trying to figure that out, I think. So you just find the people who can make those stars align, your community champions, community pioneers, whatever term you want to give them. And every community already has a wide variety of expertise and people to contribute that. You do need that key leader to bring them all together. You might need help to guide those people and guide those efforts, but it's just really assemble those key doers, identify who can help generate that excitement and the results, and who can help put the right people to work at the right time that work for each other and work for the benefit of their community.
So Ben, one other just quick question here and a process point. One is, please feel free to also, since we can answer some things in the chat too. I know for these guys, put it in the Q&A, but others are here from Bowling Green and whatnot and can answer in the chat and others can answer. But just tell us, like, from your staff or staff on the Bowling Green side, how many people, how much time?
So from my particular office, it was just me. And like I said, most of the government employees, if you will, stayed out of that, except for in a few key areas, say housing and infrastructure, those types of things, when they needed somebody that was an expertise in that field to bounce things off of. So there were maybe one government or quasi-governmental utility company or whatever employee in those meetings. But other than that, we did not want to influence and pretend we knew the answers to the questions. That's why the question was so open-ended. And I saw that question pop up was really just the one question. And that answer is yes, but we did have groups that I guess put seed statements in to start with to help generate those conversations. But those were very few compared to the 4,000 something that we ended up with. So.
Yeah. Beth, thank you for asking the elephant in the room question. And I will say we have one of the instigators of this whole Bowling Green process on the call right now. So Sam Ford, thank you for being here. Feel free to jump on in. My sense was this was something that was started at the local level by the leaders there and by some folks like Sam Ford, who are sort of involved in civil society and sort of community pioneers, as Ben said. And so this process was in motion, and they had already been looking for tech partners. And so Jigsaw really came in as this enabler to provide some of the technology stack, as well as some of the assistance on the marketing and recruiting side. And we really exist as an incubator to try to do things one time and say, can we de-risk this new idea that hasn't been done before? Can we throw a bunch of Google marketing and research and design at it and see if we can unlock it? And so everything we've done is free and open source. For those of you who know anything about open source code, that doesn't mean it's super easy, off the shelf, accessible, unfortunately, right now for everyone. But I'm hoping that in the future we will have tools that are a little bit more off the shelf. But the full tech stack, including this platform Polis that we used and the tool that we use to generate the report called SenseMaker, all of that is free and open source. But if you have questions on sort of the full process, there are FAQs and a how-to guide on the website. I'll make sure we get those dropped in the chat too. So everything here is actually replicable and customizable for your own communities too.
We have
but
a
the secret
lot.
ingredient is Sam Ford.
We have and Sam, we're going to leverage your expertise here as well in the chat, please. Let me just get to one or two more questions, and then we'll bring in the many questions we have waiting. Since you mentioned SenseMaker, let's just pivot to this question of the tech. And we have a lot of questions about what the tech stack was, what the tools were. So this is less a question about we should speak to specific platforms, but really what kind of AI are you using? How customized was it? What can, again, our goal here is to try to help others replicate some of these processes. So what can you tell us about really what the AI did and how SenseMaker really works to turn thousands of free text ideas into usable insights?
Yeah, gladly. And I'll just start by saying I am not an engineer myself. So for those of you with super technical questions, feel free to follow up with me and we can get those sorted with some of my engineering colleagues. But there are three things that the AI did that are fundamentally different than what we could do even 5 years ago. We just used one of the generic large language models, in this case, Google's Gemini, but you could have done this with ChatGPT or Claude or others. We did three things. We did categorization. So we took all of these comments and we sorted them into those topic clusters. So if you saw in that little quick data schematic I had, we had a cluster for education. We had a cluster for transportation. And then within each of those, the large language model made subtopics. And so we had a category all about parks. We had a category about roads. And it was able to sort of group the comments by these subtopics. Then within those, we were able to do the second thing was synthesis. And we've had tools to sort of synthesize human language for a long time. But what large language models are able to do is do it without losing the nuance. Do it without totally watering it down. And this is where there was some fine tuning involved with our team, making sure that we didn't lose some of the spicier sentiments. We didn't lose some of the minority voices, that we were really able to capture a whole range of perspectives in the way that the comments got summarized. And then lastly, it was able to find common ground. And so sometimes people were expressing the same idea, but they were using different language, right? Like maybe people really wanted more open spaces that were being protected, but one person's talking about it for hunting, and another person's talking about it for recreation and hiking. But you're both saying the same thing, that you want public lands to be preserved. And so I think the LLMs are really good at identifying where people are actually saying the same thing, and then making sure to elevate those places of common ground.
Oops, fantastic. So we have 1 million questions that have come in, plus the 10 million that I haven't asked you yet. But let me start to feed some of these together. And since we have so many, I'm going to do my best to I'm going to do a poor job at trying to gather and collect and moderate some of them. So I think there are a couple of questions here that really are getting to this question of the modality of engagement. So there's one person has written from Boston who's mentioned the Cortico project. Akinori is from Japan, and writes about the Cortico project and the kind of efforts to gather citizen sentiment on the one hand. And then there are other people who have written about, again, the type of question that you're asking, sort of whether you're going for consensus, whether you're going for ideas and suggestions, whether you're going for deliberation and conversation. So I'm just curious, like, how you would characterize what kind of engagement you were looking to foster, whether that's the thing you want to keep doing or whether there are other things you want to try. In other words, I think there's, both from a tool perspective and a process perspective, some differences between we want to understand how people feel about this growth versus we want concrete and specific suggestions about what they want us to do. What we heard from Hamburg a few weeks ago about specific urban planning suggestions, which is different from reactions, comments. Anyway, let me stop talking and let you guys sort of characterize the flavors and shapes of participation and deliberation and what you want to do here and what you want to do more of.
Okay. So I think from my perspective, coming in, I was somewhat skeptical, maybe jaded in a way of what the process could end up being. It was being very open was kind of scary. Not knowing how we were supposed to use those results was kind of scary. But once we saw those results, it kind of changed. And at least in my mind, the switch flipped and it's like, if nothing else, we can now have directed conversations instead of being all over the place with every subject matter. We have now we let those, just take housing, for example. All those topics came out organically from the public. And then now we know what is important to them versus what we were going to maybe go talk to them about and try to convince them we need to do. So it really narrowed the focus of those conversations and bolstered some things we were doing, but also give us ideas of where we need to have other conversations. So through that, I almost distill it down like a funnel. We started very broad. We're to the point where we're at now, and now we're going through all of this data again. And both the Planning Commission and Warren County and Bowling Green specifically have got two parallel tasks going on with Innovation Engine to go back and say, okay, now how do we narrow this down further and then put this process in this feedback loop to then get us to keep going and then keep monitoring that and keep refining it as we get more specific.
I want to hear more about how we're acting on it, Ben, but I want to make sure that I jump in on this question too, Beth, because I think I want to build on something Ben said earlier about working backwards from your end goal. My team did a whole bunch of interviews with people who professionally facilitate conversations. So everyone from conflict negotiators in Israel-Palestine to folks who run these dialogues for, the country of Finland. And we wanted to understand, how do you design one of these conversations to make it work? And they said what Ben said, you work backwards from your end goal. And so if the end goal in Bowling Green was, let's generate a whole bunch of ideas about people's visions for 2050, then you want to design for generating a lot of ideas, not necessarily designed for narrowing in on a single policy or a single outcome. And so my team actually published a little mini report of some of those findings. I'll drop it in the chat here. And the takeaway was there's sort of three different models of discussions. This one we're calling generative. And so then what modality do you use? Do you use just text? Do you use audio? Do you use video? Do you use some combination? I loved Akinori's question. It was something we thought about a lot. We did some testing, and there needs to be a lot more research here. So caveat, this is just one set of findings. But what we found was, as soon as we started to put faces, audio, video, anything that was identifying who the person was, but it was short form, it invited biases and discrimination. As soon as it was just plain black and white text, no names, no nothing, then people were engaging with the substance. I think that changes when you have longer engagements, right? If it's hours of time together, it's repeat interactions, then I think there's some value to the audio and the video. But for something that was trying to be short and sweet like we were doing, I think actually making it not audio, not video, just making it text was helpful in overcoming some of those biases.
Be interested. I think you'll get a lot of reaction to that in the chat, potentially people feeling differently about this. And this gets me to a question that Leon asks from Boston, which is to this question of self-selected versus representative. I know, Beth, you've done a lot of work on representative participation. And you talked here about some combination of the two, some efforts at doing outreach to ensure that minoritized populations were also included. Any reflections based on this experience? I'm not asking you to pick your favorite child here, but rather sort of what works well when, which do you want to do more of, pros and cons of self-selected, take all comers versus some version of selection and representative or otherwise?
Yeah, great question. This goes back to that end goal. If your end goal is just to crowdsource as many ideas as possible, which I understand to be the Bowling Green goal here, you want to make it open. And so that was why we didn't anchor on it being representative. We anchored on it being self-selected. Let's just get as many people. And ultimately, we got over 10% of the community to engage. We have also done representative. And so where we're trying to have a conversation where we say, this represents how America thinks about this. This represents how the state of South Carolina thinks about this. That's when we've gone in and used traditional survey methods. We did a little bit of a hybrid actually in Bowling Green because yes, we did do specific recruitment to folks who were underrepresented to try to make sure that migrants and folks coming out of maybe who were houseless had a chance to participate. But we also did do a representative randomized control trial survey. So we went and did a traditional survey before and after the actual month of the Bowling Green conversation. And what we were looking for was, how did this conversation affect the town writ large? Can we make some generalizable claims that are really backed up in rigorous representative data? And so we were able to say, even if people didn't participate, did just having this conversation affect people's sense of their government representing them, their ability to understand what their neighbors think? And it actually did have effects on the town writ large, even for those who didn't participate. So I think there's a world in which you do a hybrid.
Yeah, and I'll just want to add to that too. It goes back to the, make sure you have the doers in your community involved. So what do I mean by that? So we have an international liaison group that group specific population already trusted. We have other helping agencies in the community that already interact with homeless populations or whatever. If it was just me showing up saying I'm here from the government and I'm here to help, it wouldn't have worked. So you really have to be that community. It really has to be that community effort. So it was just bringing all of that together to make sure we reach those populations and that they were comfortable in participating and responding and how to respond and that we were listening. That was what's really exciting about me and how I am very confident that we reach those voices that we don't normally hear from as a government official.
So Ben, what are you guys going to do going forward? And this is really to both of you. Jigsaw, of course, is very focused on research. So what's the next? This comes back to the partnerships and other collaborations. Is the next project for you advance the research and the state of the art, or is it scaling and replicating more of what you've done here? And Ben, for the town and for the wider county, are you going to do more things like this? Are you going to institutionalize engagement of this sort or of other sorts of new ways? Like, what's the reaction from the city perspective and city leaders' perspective? So why don't we go to you first, Ben?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parallel processes going on, but it's all based off that same data. So the county and city of Bowling Green, Warren County, are working together now to go back to these pillar groups, which was the initial 80 to 100 people that got together in 8 different groups of categories, if you will, to take on this subject matter. They're going to relook at the results and come up with a top 10 or so most important items from each of those groups and submit it to a steering committee that consists of the local government officials, and then we'll decide how to take those pieces, because a lot of it goes well beyond any subject matter, and some of it is truly community focused things like healthcare, things that government don't do. So we're going to see what to do with that. On the Planning Commission side, a lot of this comments were centered around our growth issues and land use issues, housing, transportation, infrastructure, and the like. So we're going to start taking that broader picture stuff and narrow that down to come up with a vision and principles and big ideas, and then ultimately goals and objectives that'll work as a foundation and a basis for the comprehensive plan. A new comprehensive plan. It'll be a BG 2050 comprehensive plan. And then we will take those, once we narrow those down, we'll take those back out to the public and have new touch points or new meetings, new hybrid style. We'll have to figure that out. Hopefully Beth is listening, but we'll do that and invite anybody named Beth to come down and participate, and we'll take it from there. And ultimately, we're going to create policy and base policy off of this effort. And it will be likely be different policies than we've ever thought about in our little town here that is rapidly growing. So we do expect some changes to happen from this, and we expect to keep our community values that our community desires. So that's when I say that we get confidence. That's the confidence we have now from this process.
Let me make a quick announcement, because I know this is generating yet more questions that people have and excitement, is that at the end of our hour, we will invite those who need to go, and we will, at that point, host virtual wine and cheese, at which point I will stop gatekeeping and we will invite everybody to join in a conversation. Ben and Beth, if you need to go, that's fine. If some of your teams can stay, but I just want to let people know there will be opportunity to continue the conversation for those who would like. But Beth, let me give you a chance to answer that question, and then we'll gather some more.
Sure. If I understood the question, sort of what's Jigsaw doing next? Because we're an incubator and we're trying to do sort of proof of concepts of what's possible, can we demonstrate something that's never been done before? We unfortunately aren't going to keep replicating the exact same thing we did in Bowling Green. Bowling Green is unique. We can never replicate Bowling Green exactly. But we've been spending our time looking at nationwide level conversations. And so just about 2 weeks ago now, we released something called We the People. I'll drop a link in the chat, but We the People was a representative conversation. We recruited Americans from every congressional district and brought them into a 3-part conversation. And so this built on the model of Bowling Green, where the first round was generative, right? The first round was asking people to submit ideas to sort of an open-ended question. And then we had 2 different rounds on top of that also leveraged AI, but they started to converge people. They started to have people reflect on one another's ideas, but not just with upvotes and downvotes. They actually reflected on other people's ideas with longer form text. So they were really kind of more of in a dialogue with each other, even though, again, anonymous, asynchronous text. And then the final round there was actually ranking ideas. So the AI synthesized all of the ideas, and this was 1.6 million words, which my colleague told me is 3 entire Lord of the Rings trilogies back to back. That's how much text people generated. So I love that visual. Lots of text. The AI distills it down into, in our case, about 26 sentence long statements. So 26 sentences. And people had to rank those and decide which of those were most important to them or most closely to what they believed. We were asking them questions like, what should equality look like in America? What does freedom mean in America? So these were, again, a little bit less tangible. These aren't policy questions. These were about ideals. But the hope was that these could inform policymakers. These could inform polling organizations, civil society organizations about what Americans actually think. And so all of that data is now free. It's sort of interactive. You can play with it. We'll be doing another one of those conversations at a nationwide scale in the spring. And again, really refining both the ability to generate a ton of information from the public and then the ability to come back in and converge around what are our priorities as a collective.
So I have a long list of unanswered questions, as people do. I'm glad that some folks can stay on to continue the conversation. But let me ask you, with our last few minutes left, since I know we have busy people who have to get back to work, hopefully going off to go do engagement, what advice do you have for them, especially knowing maybe they can't get Jigsaw to come in and help them? Maybe they don't have the special sauce of Bowling Green, but what can they try for themselves? What mindsets or skill sets, what staffing do's, don'ts, positive, negative, however you want to tell us, what can you tell people, the public servants who are here, what they can do to achieve some of the success that you have and to try to institutionalize engagement?
Don't try to do it on your own. I mean, it really needs to be about community to be successful and generate the type of excitement that we have here for this process. People like to hear from government officials, but they also don't like to hear from them. They like to hear from their friends, their family, their network of coworkers. So just find those key people and assemble the team. You know who that team is. I think one of the other things that was very successful here was the decision on the pillar groups. It was about 80 to 100 people that were selected. very diverse backgrounds, come from all different expertise, all different, employment sectors, but also all different age groups and tenure in the community. It wasn't just the old guard that you see at every board meeting, every chamber meeting, so on and so forth. It truly was a cross section of people that are plugged into the community to different parts of the community. And that's where the outreach worked as much as anything and got that participation going. Can't speak to the AI piece of it very much, but really, it's no different than any other process. It's good data in, good data out. So you just have to spend your time making sure you're getting that good data in, that good cross representation, and those outreach efforts.
Beth, with our 2 minutes left, can you speak to the AI piece?
Yeah, I'd just say the AI piece is 2% of the whole process. If you look end to end at why Bowling Green worked, it was because folks like Ben and Sam had a whole process end to end where they brought in 100 listening partners who are all these community leaders that were there at every step of the way. We co-designed the outreach, the marketing, the actual report itself, the product. All that was co-designed with these 100 listening partners who then acted as ambassadors for us. So it really is a story not of AI, but of community-wide collaboration and co-ownership. The AI piece, don't be intimidated by it. There's free and open source tools, and actually most of the tech used here was stuff that's been around for over a decade. The AI part was this real quick shot that just summarized and categorized all the data at the end. There are a number of tools now that can do that beyond just Jigsaw's SenseMaker. So again, don't let the AI intimidation or fear about hallucination be a gating factor here. The much harder part is what Ben was describing, that sort of bringing everyone along for the journey end to end.
But we will remind people that the tools you do provide are free and open source, as is Polis, and there are other things like it. Thank you to both of you, both for the work that you've been doing in the field and for joining us to share some of that knowledge. We want to thank your teams also who are here helping in the chat, and to our audience, our committed and devoted audience who is here. Just as a reminder, 2 workshops coming up in this series. I'm going to put them in the chat. So if you want to sign up for more workshops, let me put the link there. Coming up next week, we have one specifically on co-creating with multilingual communities. So there were a lot of questions here about being inclusive. That's a lot about what we're going to talk about on the 10th. And on the 18th, Danielle will be hosting a chat with Audrey Tang, who is probably known to everybody here as the former Minister of Digital Affairs in Taiwan, talking about citizen engagement globally, and we'll be reflecting on what's happened in this series. Let's get out everybody who wants to leave on time. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our hosts and your staff. For those who want to stay for wine and cheese, pause for a moment. We'll end the recording, and you can ask and get hopefully answers to all of your questions. Thank you, everybody.